Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem, and I'm very excited today to have a guest whose channel I admire. I love his deep dives into books, and I always find new stuff for my TBR, even when I think I've seen it all. Sam from iSamwise, how are you doing? Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Doing great. Great to talk to you.
Absolutely. Likewise, man. I know we were talking about this before that we're like two, as you mentioned, two ships passing in the night.
Mm.
We have seen each other's channels a bunch over the last couple years,
Yep.
and been a part of the Drowned Kingdom discussion for I think one of the books. And
Yep.
so yeah, we haven't gotten a chance to do this and actually get to know each other a little bit better. And I guess our audiences can get to know us as well in the process and chat about books. So I'm
Yeah.
really excited that you're here, man.
No, thanks for having me. I think our channels probably started up around a similar time. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's been cool to see that whole like cluster of booktubers that started coming up on around 2 years ago, something like that. And obviously you've
Totally.
been doing it for around that long. And so yeah, I've enjoyed watching your stuff, and it'll be great to chat because like you said, there's some overlap in terms of like what we read and what we enjoy, but there's also some divergence there. And I know like you've gotten me
Mm.
thinking about like Robert McCammon a lot more. I'm like, maybe I should get to that sometime.
I think I just get this feeling since you like fantasy, since you like because his stuff is not fantasy, but there's tie-ins, I think, in terms of the way he writes, and his character work is some of the best. It's like just so grounded
Mm,
and so real. So I think I just get this feeling you'll probably really like Robert McCammon and most specifically that Matthew Corbett series. I've been
mm.
basically talking about like every video because it's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
good. But I guess, I would love to know from you, because I always love to ask this question at the beginning of these videos. Was there any seminal book that growing up that made you a reader? Or maybe it's a two-part question. Maybe growing up and then, our reading tastes change and stuff, but maybe either refinding that love of reading as an adult, or, what was that thing that really carried your reading habit into adulthood?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess there's sort of like two to three parts
Yeah,
to that question in terms of the answer. Um,
yeah.
I've talked about this before. My parents growing up, um, my dad wasn't much of a reader, but my mom read, off and on. But there were lots of books around, and reading was encouraged. And she had this set of like big illustrated like classics that were like child appropriate. So like Mark Twain and Alice in Wonderland and The Jungle Book, and classics, but they're suitable for kids to read as well.
I'm
They're like
nodding my head because
big
I
and
read a
nicely.
bunch of those as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So they were like big and nicely illustrated and hardbound. And there was one, I wasn't allowed to read them until I like showed myself to be like responsible enough, at like 6, something like that. I'm not going to
Mhm.
say the meme, so we'll just leave it at 6. um, but so somewhere in there, I was deemed responsible enough to finally get to read these big books, and it was there was a version of the Robin Hood stories, written by, I believe it was Lewis Reed, was the
Mm.
guy, and I probably read through that probably about 4 times, and just loved it. Just loved reading, and that was like the first time that like reading became more than like an assignment, of like, all
Yeah.
right, schoolwork time. Here's a chapter book to read, and it was like, oh, this is awesome, and it felt like it was my thing. And
Yeah.
then kind of going out of middle school and into high school, it would have been, and like it's such a like a snot nosed like hipster answer, but it would have been Les Miserables by Victor
Oh,
Hugo,
cool. Yeah.
uh, that really got me into reading like as an adult and being like, oh, this is like my thing now. Because
Mm.
I'd listened to a radio drama version of Les Mis and knew nothing about the story going in, had only heard the name in passing. But I was like, cool, I need something to listen to. So I listened to the radio drama of it, and it like knocked me off my feet, uh,
Wow.
changed the course of my of my life, and I was like, okay, I got to read this book now. All like
Mm.
1,800 pages, and it probably took me months and months to read through. But yeah, that's like the book that made me a reader of actual like adult
Mm.
books. So yeah, and that
What a
was
nice yeah.
Yeah, say what?
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna
So
say, yeah, that's like going into high school was sort of that, and then people say like, "Oh, fell away during college," and I read a lot more like nonfiction during college, and then
yeah,
like read Dune, read Lord of the Rings in college because I'd not gotten to Dune to that point, and you know you start with the classics and then kind of expand out from there. But that's
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's the short version of the story.
That's amazing. That's amazing, man. It's always fascinating to see, where people's influences lie and kind of what is that one thing that makes them a reader, because we all have very different, kind of pathways to finding books. And I love that, like, and, a massive tome of a novel was the thing that kind of propelled you into adulthood. I feel like that's very nicely adjacent to fantasy, where the
Hmm.
majority of books are over 500 pages, right? So
Hmm.
not a big transition from one to the other in the best of
Yeah.
ways. Yeah, that's great. And when did you find like fantasy? I guess Lord of the Rings was kind of that seminal work, Dune.
Mhm.
Were there other like modern fantasy works or other works that made you kind of decide like, oh, I want to read more of this genre?
Hmm. Yeah. So, I always knew that I was like interested in the fantastical and like pseudo mythic type of stories,
Cool.
growing up,
Yeah.
and like those archetypal type of stories. And I think that's still probably largely true. Like both Dune and Lord of the Rings are very much dealing in archetypes and playing with that, and even stuff like more recent books that I love, like Book of the New Sun, play with
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. I will say and this is one of those like, yeah, this almost sounds like I made it up, but I promise I didn't. When I was like after I read Les Mis, okay, so this is
Hmm.
right before high school. um, I was like, all right, well, I'm just gonna like read massive books now, and like
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
have it be almost an ego thing. And I went into my library and I was wandering through the adult book section and
Hmm.
was near the authors with the last name of S and found a really big book called The Way of Kings. And I was
Oh,
like, oh, that's an interesting title. So I pulled it out and was like, wow, that's an awesome cover. And like checked it out. I never read it. I owned a copy for years and like never read it. So I was aware of Brandon Sanderson for years, and then listened to his writing classes, having not like read a single book from him.
wow. Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
read I read actually some of his Alcatraz books. So that's not true. I read some of his like little kids
Oh,
books,
really? Oh,
um,
that's cool.
which I,
Yeah.
I actually think are quite good.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then after like Dune and Lord of the Rings and some of that stuff, yeah, then read like Mistborn, read like enough of Wheel of Time before realizing like that wasn't
Quite
necessarily
a,
the
yeah.
series that was going to be quite for me. Um,
Where did you
but
stop in Wheel of Time, by the way?
book six, I read through book
Ah,
six,
okay,
so
okay, cool.
yeah,
So you definitely saw some of the high points of the series, I would say, through
yeah. I and I
through book
liked
six.
I really enjoyed the first three especially.
Yeah.
And I think what really did it for me is I heard everybody say like book four is like one of the best books in the series, and that
Mm,
one just didn't land for me. Um, Maybe if I reread it, like I don't know, never say never.
right, right. Yeah.
If I get 50 more years of reading life in front of me, maybe I'll come back to it. But
It's hard enough finding time for the books that you want to read like right now anyways.
yeah.
Um yeah, I feel you. Yeah, no, for me it was is I remember when I was a kid I used to go to Scholastic book fairs in the East Coast. I used to live in New Jersey, and
Mm,
I found Goosebumps by R.L. Stein, and I
mm,
was like obsessed with those. I was collecting all of them and reading them multiple times, and that was kind of the beginnings of finding fascination with reading. And then I found Stephen King when I was a teenager, and I read
mm,
Pet Cemetery, and I tried to read it, but man, it was pretty disturbing, and I put it down for a little bit. And then college came, and I was just like so burnt out from the reading that was assigned that I didn't, read that much. I did read those great illustrated classics, by the way, just sidebar,
mm,
when I was younger. And I remember David Copperfield was like my favorite one of
mhm,
all of them that I'd read. So those were also a big part of my like childhood reading. But
yeah.
then in my 20s, I didn't read much at all. And I really only rediscovered reading in my early 30s again.
Mm,
And so I took a 10-year break pretty much, and then I found The Dark Tower. I found and I started reading more Stephen King, and then eventually I found The Wheel of Time like in 2019,
Mm,
and that was it. It blew the doors wide open for me because it also showed me what was possible. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. It's like fantasy. One has a preconceived notion of what it is. Before, I think a lot of people who don't read fantasy, who look at it from the outside, they think it's a specific thing. Sword and sorcery, dragons, elves, dwarves, a lot of like stuff that, to an outsider's perspective, maybe they don't, that may not be the necessary selling point. But then you actually start to explore fantasy, and it's like anything, the rabbit hole goes so deep. So fantasy can be so many different things,
mhm.
which, and it kind of made me realize, oh, you can have Eastern philosophy in fantasy. Oh, that's interesting. You can have a wizard who lives in Chicago. That's fantasy. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So we all need that gateway read, right? That gets us into a thing.
Well, to the
So
outsider who doesn't have much like familiarity with the genre, and they're expecting,
Mhm.
as I think it's Media Death Cult that calls it like books about goblins riding horses. If like that's what you're expecting. Like,
Yeah,
okay, like try reading like Dark Tower,
right.
like love it or hate it. Like there's nothing quite like that.
Yeah, yeah. Complete. It's like almost like a deconstruction of the tropes you would expect.
Yeah.
And I feel the same with First Law. I forget. Have you read all the First Law books or?
The first seven, so
Okay,
not the
cool,
last
cool.
trilogy.
I've only read the first six, I think.
Okay.
So I'm one behind you. Yeah, I still have Red Country to
Yeah.
do. But again,
Okay.
another deconstruction of the genre in a lot of ways. It's like the characters go in places you don't expect,
Hmm.
and like the idea of like, can somebody be redeemed?
Yeah.
That's interesting because you always have arcs where it's you. That's kind of the expectation,
Right.
right? It's like there's this some sort of redemption arc, but it's like, well, real life is a little messy. It's not always the same. It's and art can reflect life as much as it reflects back on the art. So
Hmm.
it's fascinating, man. I'm curious,
Yeah.
from your perspective, like, when did you discover BookTube, and what was the
Hmm.
thing that made you go, I want to make my own channel? Like, was there a specific instance, or maybe a video you saw, or a series you were reading at the time? Was there anything in particular that really
Yeah.
resonated with you? Yeah.
I first found BookTube in 2015. Um, and
Cool.
I found what it was I had told a friend I want to read books about dragons, and it was about as
Mm,
specific as that. Um, and so I had a friend who was like, "Oh, well, like Aragon is like one of these like famous like dragon rider books. You should read it." I was like,
mm,
"Okay." So I went to YouTube to see if there was any reviews about Aragon, and that primarily came out of like I watched a lot of like like the classic like YouTube like movie reviewers, like Jeremy Johns
oh
and those
yeah,
types of
yeah.
guys. So being like having watched a bunch of that, I was like, okay, do people talk about books on YouTube? And I found a channel. The guy's name is Crimson Rogue.
Hmm.
And he used to do this show called The Book Was Better, where he compares uh, books and movies and talks about the adaptation and whether it was good or
That's
not.
cool.
And
Wow.
now he sort of does like mammoth-sized 6 to 18 hour long like deconstructing really awful books. So he does slightly different
Wow.
videos now, but they're still great.
Yeah.
But that was the first booktuber I ever watched,
Wow.
and then I actually had a channel when I was like 16 to 18.
Oh, it's
Um,
amazing.
and there's like was nobody on BookTube who was reading the type of books I wanted to read. At that time, BookTube was mainly just uh, young adult, basically
Oh.
people reading young adult fiction and like slice of life type of stuff. And so I read some of that. There's a few books from that I liked, but overall that wasn't necessarily my thing.
Hmm.
Like I remember back when Jay from Captured in Words like read The Way of Kings for the first time. I remember
Oh,
seeing that
wow.
video come up.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so sorry, I'm not like trying to like flex of like, oh, I
No,
remember, but it was like,
back in
this was
my day.
before, right,
Yeah.
but like this is like before like Mike and
Sure.
right when Daniel Green would have been getting going. So,
Wow.
but then, and like my videos weren't good. I was very much in it for like, and I never had a video like hit over 100 views. reviews. Okay, so that's to like
Mhm.
tell you how the landscape has changed. So that channel is long gone. No, you can't find the videos anywhere. They are
Yeah.
all
That was
deleted.
gonna be my
Yeah.
next question.
um, but then I came back to BookTube right around the time when I started reading Dune and Lord of the Rings because I had this question of like I knew Sanderson had written a ton of stuff, but like where do you start? And
Mm,
so from
yeah.
there found Daniel Green and Mike and all these people talking about Mistborn. And then I started making videos trying to think when. Honestly, a big inspiration for why I started. Well, there's probably two main big ones, which is the guys at Tutor Ramble.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I was a patron of theirs right when they opened Patreon for about a year, and really loved the dynamic, loved their community. But they were never reading the books that I wanted them to read, and so I was finally like, okay, I'm gonna like, I pulled a Thanos. I was like, I'll do it myself. Um, so I'd say like those guys and Jimmy Nuts were like
Oh,
two of the
cool.
big
Yeah.
people who was like, I think I could, I think I could do this and maybe put a different enough spin on how I talk about books to not just
Mm.
be, um, I don't know, to not just be regurgitating other people's opinions that I'm listening to. So
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry, that's a
Yeah.
long answer, but
Oh, it's beautiful. I love that you approached it from your own perspective, and to that point, the idea of like regurgitating other opinions. I think, it's like we're all, as booktubers and also as viewers. I was just watching a live stream of Jenny Wirtz actually earlier today, and she was talking about
Mm,
how before BookTube, before all these platforms, the advantage of these platforms is you can reach so many more people than you could ever
right.
reach before. The disadvantage is you're constantly hearing other people's opinions, as you form your own. So
Yeah.
oftentimes they're informed by what you see or what you hear from others rather than you informing your own opinion. And I love that you kind of decided, like, hey, I'm not seeing this kind of stuff as much. I'm going to make it the kind of stuff I would want to see.
Mhm.
And I think like that's the beauty of BookTube really, is that there's so many different types of people, types of readers, different backgrounds, and so that all filters through w- what people see. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's great that you started, man. I'm really glad that you're here in this booktube space because I enjoy watching your videos and I know a lot of other people do too. So it's
Yeah. Well,
great,
thank
man.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's I didn't even know BookTube was a thing till 2019. And when I discovered The Wheel of Time, started reading the books because I wanted to do a Hail Mary pitch for the show. And
Mm,
I, and I was like, this is a lot of information. I should probably have companion videos to look at, while reading
mhm,
these books because I'm not going to remember 2,800 characters. Like, and then so I'm like, I wonder if they do book reviews on YouTube. And so I
mm,
typed in like Wheel of Time book review, and Daniel Green popped up. So I was like, wow, this is incredible. And so I started, just diving into Daniel Green's channel. Then I found Mike's book reviews and Philip Chase and Joanna Reed's and so on and so forth. But I didn't really think that I had much to offer the
mm,
booktube space at that time. I was just enjoying watching. I was like, oh, how cool would it be to do a video? But I don't know anything about this stuff. Like, I'm just kind of formulating like my love of reading it now. And so it was only a few years later, in 2024, I decided to finally do it. And I don't know if there was like a grand plan behind it, except that
mm,
I just went, I'm tired of saying I will do it. I might as well just do it. I can
mhm.
always, if it ends up being too much of a time commitment, if it ends up being something that's not for me, I can
Right.
always stop.
Yeah.
But how can you know whether you want to stop if you don't start in the first place? So that was
Yeah.
kind of the like little light bulb moment for me. But man, I mean, this community is just awesome. Like it is so supportive. And I wish that there was something like that in, say, the music or film industries, because you don't see the same kind of support and, like of authors having each other on their channel, creating discussions about books that they're really passionate about, having readers and authors all in one kind of ecosystem, like reading each other's stuff, enjoying it, commenting on it, supporting it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you don't see that. I think in to your point of watching like film things or film reviews and things like that, oftentimes those are almost like channels, a lot of times are like islands into themselves with their own communities, but
Yep.
you don't see like a lot of cross pollination of like, hey, we should do discussions like this and chat about cool films that we're really into. So I think the book space has found something very special, you know.
Yeah, and it's not to say that there's like that the book space is perfect. I mean, you'll get
Yeah,
those
yeah,
videos every once in a while where people are like, "Oh, booktubers are at it just about the money," and it's like, well,
yeah,
haven't made a penny yet, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't know that I will,
exactly.
but like, good to know that they know my soul better than I do. But like to your point, like, man, you look at just how, um, I don't know, man. It's like, when's the last time that you saw like somebody talking about how the last book that they read was secretly like communist or fascist propaganda, you know? And that's like
Mm,
what half of movie discussions are anymore. It's like, really? Is this like fun
right,
for you guys? Like,
right,
really?
right.
Like, we're just
Yeah,
screaming at each other because we're mad about like you didn't like the movie that I liked or you disagree with my interpretation on it. And there's
yeah,
so little of that in at least our corner of BookTube, you know, and so much of people
mm,
even if, like, I
yeah,
mean, there's channels that I watch where it's like, I don't think you like a single book that I like, but I enjoy you as a person, enjoy you as a personality, and so, you know,
yeah.
wanna keep watching.
You know, actually, that's a very good point. I didn't think about it in quite those terms before, but you really articulated kind of what I think I've felt for a while. Is like, you know, in other art, like let's say movies, for example, people know that rage baiting and
Mhm.
creating like very strong opinionated conversations around a particular topic is the surefire way to get views,
Yeah.
you know, and so they go for that as like the path of least resistance. And you know, then it creates a culture of more of that, whereas
Yep.
I think with books there's a different approach to reading than there is any other art form, you know, where it's like it's a time commitment. You know, when you pick up a book,
Mhm.
you're looking at, you know, a dozen or more, several dozen hours, depending
Mhm.
on the size of the book. And you know, there's a patience and kind of a meditative aspect of reading that comes with that. There's also the characters are so nuanced, you're kind of forced to challenge yourself a little bit as you
Mhm.
read, you know? And it's like it just makes someone a more thoughtful person, empathetic person in a way, so that I'm sure that filters into the discussions too, you know?
Yeah.
And also because books are not, you know, I feel like books are seeing a resurgence right now, which in some ways, which is really great. But books are not the go-to, you know, again, path of least resistance entertainment
Right.
form for the masses. Like that's not what people do typically. So you know, it feels nice. Like, oh, you get me too. Like, hey,
Right,
we're all
right.
readers here. Like, we all want to do this thing. So I think there's these are very specific and special aspects of this, you know, what we all got going on here.
Yeah, and I don't I don't know, I feel like I'm getting, like, spicy or maybe a bit too riled up here,
No,
but,
go
like,
for it, man.
when
Let
you're
it fly.
talking about, like, this path of least resistance, you know, we've all seen those, like, movie review thumbnails where they take, like, an actor or actress's face and they digitally, like, screw it up and add, like, tears or whatever,
Yeah,
you know, and
yeah,
it's, like,
right.
those types of things, like and I'm not just speaking, like, on a personal preference thing, but, like, those types of videos maybe there are exceptions, but for the vast majority of those types of things, that is wrong. It is wrong
Yeah,
to do things like that because what you're doing is you're making the world a worse place. You're
yeah,
dividing people over things that do not matter, over the dumbest, silliest things. And I think you're right that like with with books and with readings, I don't know, maybe I'm not articulating the best, but like there's a
yeah,
greater barrier of entry, and people realize that like actually taking the easy way out because it makes you money, because it gets you views, because it gets people riled up, and when they're riled up, they keep watching. Um, that's not the best way. That's not
mhm,
sustainable for creating like you know, a happy, healthy community. And
yeah,
for most booktubers where they're not making bank off of this, they're not, you know, they like there's in our circle of booktube there's maybe 3 people who do this as their job, you know. For
yeah,
most other
yeah,
people this is a hobby, and so since it is a hobby, I would rather try to get people to read books that are going to make them think about the world in maybe a different way, that are going to make them ponder things more deeply, or that are going to be like really entertaining and a really fun time, rather than I'm mad because this person said something I don't like, or I'm mad because this book, you know, I disagree with like a social point that's made in this book. Um,
yeah,
like that might make you more clearly is more popular, clearly gets more views. But the path to hell is steep and easy to go down, and I don't think that's a, I would like to avoid that, and I think most people in our circles on some level realize that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I think a lot about that because everything is so algorithm based now.
Hmm.
And it's very easy to fall in that trap. It's like I know whenever I'm putting a music post up, there's always like, I try to fight it myself, but there's always the comparison trap. There's always like, oh, how can I make this reach more people? And the reach
Yeah.
more people is both a blessing and a curse because, there's there's many ways to reach people. It's just the quality of reach that you want.
Yeah.
It's better, at least in my personal philosophy, it's better to reach less people and have it more meaningful
That's
than
right.
to
Yep.
try to reach as many people possible. And it's very, low touch point, or also, you know, creating more havoc than you
Yeah.
create value. So, yeah, preaching to the choir here, man.
That's exactly right. And like there is, lest sound like I'm disparaging anyone who does any video because like a top 10 list because they think it'll do well. Like there is a certain tension there in the sense of like if I made videos and literally nobody watched them, guess what? I'm gonna stop making videos because
Yeah,
clearly
yeah.
nobody's interested. So I want to do stuff that like some people are interested in, but I don't want to do
Mhm.
stuff just because people are gonna be interested in it. Um,
Yes, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's a better way of
It's
saying it.
Yeah, yeah, it's a delicate balance. It's you want to entertain people in a sense, or you want to create something that makes people want to watch, of course.
Hmm.
And then it's just like, what does that mean for us, in terms of what would we feel comfortable that, oh, this reflects me to some degree.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's always a push and pull, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah. I wanted to also kind of steer the conversation because I know we've been talking about a lot of cool stuff already. And I know we've been talking about our kind of mutual love of like fantasy,
Hmm.
sci-fi, introspective books with a lot of character exploration. And so I was pleasantly surprised when you reached out to me also saying like, hey, we should check out, you'd given me a few, books to kind of consider, maybe we buddy read something together. And on that list was one book I had on my shelf anyways, I was looking forward to reading, and that was The Power of the Dog.
Mm.
Which, for anyone who doesn't know, this is, I've spoken about it on my channel a little bit, but it's a crime thriller, so definitely out of my wheelhouse. Maybe a little bit more in yours, right, Sam? Or maybe
It's with that.
slightly
I've
more.
read some crime, but like it's
Yeah,
not my normal bread and butter, at least not right now.
right. Yeah, 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 totally, totally. And it's gotten me, especially over the last couple of years, like I've wanted to branch out more as a reader, try out different genres, try out different authors, be challenged more. So I was very excited that we were going to read something that I had not, didn't know too much about. And anything in relation to this book, by the way, everyone watching this, we're going to keep it spoiler free because I think
Yeah.
a lot of people have probably not read The Power of the Dog and wouldn't want to dissuade you by giving you plot spoilers or anything. So we're going to keep this high level so we can, hopefully get a few more of you to pick up the book, or also
Yeah.
give you any reservations we have, if any. But yeah, I would love to know, like, because I know we kind of finished it around a similar time. What did you
Mhm.
think of this book? What were your like high level thoughts on it?
Yeah. So this is my first Don Winslow book, and I know
Yeah,
he's a
me too.
fairly well respected like crime novelist, but this is the first I've read from him, and I think probably his most famous from the little bit that I know of him. Um, this is a really tricky book to talk about in some ways. Like on Goodreads, I'm I'm a big believer and defender in the star rating. Like I love it. I
Yeah.
like people are like, oh, but it doesn't mean anything. I'm like, I don't care. I love I love star ratings anyway.
I do
Um,
too. I do too.
and Power of the Dog is one of like two books in the last few years that I've read with no star rating. It's like Power of the Dog and The Unholy Consult by R. Scott Baker.
Wow.
And both of them I left without a star rating. And for actually very similar reasons now that I think about it, which is like,
Right. I was gonna say, yeah.
yeah, it's like how do I evaluate a book in which like there's two sides of my brain. Um there's like a side that is objectively analyzing the craft of what the author is doing, and then
Mm.
there's like a personal enjoyment and aesthetics side. And it's like on the personal enjoyment side, there are times where Power of the Dog is like a 2 out of 5. It's like
Yeah.
very, very low in terms of my enjoyment. On a craft level, I don't think it ever dipped below a 4 out of 5. Like it's a very, very well constructed book about, this DEA agent, Art Keller, who is kind of on the ground level as this crime family. Oh, what's the last name of the family?
Barrera.
The Barrera family. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like had a different name stuck in my head.
No, no, all
Um,
good.
the yeah, he's kind of on the ground level as the Barrera family power structure is starting to change hands, and then you follow him after that for decades and decades as this drug war goes on, and you see the broad range of how this affects so much more than what you might initially expect when talking
Mm.
about a novel about the war on drugs and the cartels in Mexico. So, um, yeah, I guess that's a long way of saying I found the characters to be very engaging to read about. He has that element that people talk about with authors like Joe Abercrombie, with authors like Stephen King, with
Mm.
authors like Orson Scott Card, where within a paragraph of reading from a character's point of view without knowing the tag of like who this is, you can tell who it is by how they think, by how they talk. He's got that
Yeah.
really like clear characterization. um this is not a short book, especially compared to like other crime novels. It's like 20
Mm.
hours on audiobook. um and yet, like, I flew through it. I found it
Mm.
very, very engaging while being dark and screwed up and repulsive at times. And one scene, which I don't think is a spoiler to say, is a scene where a character gets beheaded. That I think is maybe the most like the nastiest thing I've read, maybe
Yeah.
ever, certainly in a
Right.
long, long time. And
Yeah.
if I hadn't been reading it for like a buddy read, I may have put it down, just being like, "Whoa, okay, like take five,
Yeah.
Sam.
Yeah.
This is a
Yeah.
lot." Um,
Sure.
so like,
Right.
and like for fans of this book, like I'm not saying Winslow's bad or that he shouldn't have written the book the way it is. Like I'll leave that up to individual readers. I'm just saying for me,
Mm.
like this book, I've got a pretty high tolerance for violence and for disturbing content in a lot of books.
Yeah.
And there's some pretty specific reasons as to why that is. But this one tested some of those limits. So
Mm. Mm.
that's the long version of it, I guess. There.
Yeah, no, I'm very much in agreement in a lot of respects. I mean, I flew through this book. I absolutely loved it. But it feels funny to say I loved something so disturbing because it definitely felt like another book I read. I forgot. I think it's by Jack Ketchum called The Girl Next Door. Again,
Mhm.
another historically based book, but it really doesn't shy away from stuff. Like it doesn't do stuff off the page. It shows
Mhm.
you on the page what's happening. And both books brought me a similar level of discomfort and probably some of the most violent stuff I've ever read. What I loved about it, in spite of that aspect of it, was how sprawling it is. You
Mhm.
have, like you mentioned, I think Don Winslow picked a starting point of this novel in the 70s as a very unique time to start it because the Mexican cartels were getting going. Cocaine was just flowing into the United States at this point. And so it's kind of the turning point of uh the drug empire building, and you start to see like cracks make its way on the streets. This is like this kind of turning point. And there's the Colombians, there's the Mexicans, there's the Venezuelans on
Mhm.
one side working in cahoots, and then you have the DEA agent, you have the mafiosos on the East Coast. So you just have it's a very it almost feels like um in terms of the world building, a fantasy book. It just feels funny to even say that because it's such a gritty, rooted crime thriller based on real stuff. Names are switched out, but definitely
Yeah.
situations you can imagine are not. But I don't know, there's something about it that felt very world building, and also the characters you really get to, like you said, Sam, you get to know the inside of their mind. I mean, like Art's obsession with fighting this war at any cost, and the personal demons that either come from it or ones that were always latent but get worse
Right.
over time. The cost. What's the cost? Not only on the innocent bystanders, but the people involved. I thought that that was phenomenal. And I also felt like the side characters, all the little side characters of the mafiosos. I forget what was that one guy who I'm not gonna even remember his name, but he was like a kid, and him and his friend, they like shot some guy in a
Yeah.
bar, and then their infamy grows. But
The guys
yeah,
from New
so
York.
yes, exactly, exactly. So like you get to understand the inner workings of these characters, even the minor players, and that is very rare that in a book like this that one could do that. So I just found that to
Mhm.
be amazing. But it is a very hard book to recommend because I think like if you have a trigger, like if you have a trigger of some sort, it's probably in this book. It's like trigger warning central.
Yeah.
So it is hard to recommend. It's definitely a go at your own risk. But I think if you do, like, I learned so much about the war on drugs and like how the political aspects of things, both in the inside of the criminal organizations, within the DEA, and even the politics of like the U.S. Presidential politics and stuff were involved. I mean, I
Mm.
learned so much about
Yeah.
that. I found that to be very fascinating. You know, so it's a tough one.
Yeah, and I think I I I think it's a great example for if, we were talking about how people, if they have a view of a genre, um
Mm,
but they haven't necessarily read it, uh there are things that can really shake up those expectations, like Dark Tower with fantasy. And I think Power of the
mm,
Dog actually works in a similar way with that, with something like crime fiction, where it's like if your image of crime fiction is Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, these like classic mystery type of crime stories, or even like old noir guys like Raymond Chandler stories, and that's
mm,
the extent of your exposure uh, to crime novels. I think
yeah.
Power of the Dog does a really good job of showing just what you can do within that genre, and how, like you said, epic in scale, you can tell a story. Um,
Mm,
and
mm,
interesting enough, I mean, and Winslow does in this book what every good author can do, which is uh, make you root for people that you see. If you were to meet them in real life, you would think are absolutely reprehensible moral monsters.
yeah.
Like Adon Barrera, who's one of the main primary people in the cartels, is just a despicable, horrible, evil person. And then there are times when you're reading from his point of view where you're like, am I kind of rooting for you, Adon? Because like I kind of want to see you like overcome this like obstacle in your life. And then they'll talk
Yeah.
about like
Yeah.
him, his kids, and it's like, oh man. And so like Winslow's like doing what every good author does, is like making you root for people that normally you wouldn't. And
Mm,
exercising those empathy muscles, which isn't a bad thing. Uh
absolutely. I thought the passages where Adan was talking about his daughter, or taking care of her and everything, were just so endearing. And it was
mhm,
hard to reconcile the fact that, oh, this is the same
right,
guy who did all the other stuff. And
right.
it just reminds me, it's like even the delineated good and bad sides have, nobody is all one thing. It's still, we are so
Mhm,
much more complex and nuanced. And you can see it when you see it, rooted against the backdrop of something that's still ongoing. I mean, you
mhm,
see all the stuff that's been going on with the cartel recently,
mhm.
and it's like it was interesting that we were finishing this book right around the time that stuff started popping off. But it's just
Yeah,
like,
like
yeah,
Winslow doesn't let anyone off the hook in this book. He's like,
mm,
guess what? The US government is screwed up. They're not winning this war. People are in this for themselves. Also, that doesn't make the other side good or okay. And there's a lot
mm,
of evil things happening on both sides. Um,
yeah,
I think the
yeah,
first torture scene is US agents torturing a guy in the book.
right,
It's like
right.
sickening.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, 100%, 100%. And I think that's like, wars, even the traditional idea of warfare is kind of presented in a different light, because war on drugs almost sounds like a cool flashy name for it, right? But it really is that, and
Yeah.
therefore that both sides have casualties. and it's usually the innocent, that are the casualties, the biggest casualties of
Yes.
war,
Yep.
right? People are dragged into it against their will, oftentimes, where there people are pawns in this political war game that's going on. So I don't know, it's just really got me thinking about just our world, our place in it, just kind of what, you know, how deep the rabbit hole goes in these things that we hear about on the news, but really what we're hearing is the headlines. We don't hear the
Right.
little stories, the granular stuff. And this book, I feel like, really gives you a taste of it, for better or for worse.
Yeah. Well,
You
and
know?
and to that point of like giving you a taste of what you see in the headlines, because it's easy to do that, right? To just see, and
Mm.
especially since we're talking about algorithms profiting off of negativity. Like that's exactly what the news is, and so
Yeah.
there's a certain sense in which it's easy to feel a certain amount of empathy exhaustion, where it's like, oh,
Mm.
another awful thing has happened, and like there's another thing this week, or there were several things last week, or whatever. It seems
Yeah.
like a
Yeah. Yeah.
constant, cycle, if you will. And in this book, it like Winslow doesn't let you see the horrible things that have happened as just something to read past. Of like, oh, it's a headline, and then you move on. Whether
Mm. Yeah.
it's the character of Nora, who we haven't really brought up a whole lot, but is
Mhm.
a prostitute that's brought into kind of the center of the conflict in a lot of ways, whether it's her, whether it's the families of Art or some of the other people around them, the horrific things that happen, like they don't get to just move on from them.
Mm.
um like this changes them forever, and in almost every case for the worse. um
Yeah.
and like Winslow, like holding your head and not letting you like look away from it is part of what made the book like so disturbing for me at times. Like, just to be transparent, like people know this, it's in my like icon, but like I'm a dad, I've got a kid, and
Yeah.
there's a couple of scenes, especially of like violence against children in this book, where I like had to stop and take a break for a while, because
Yeah.
it was pretty disturbing. And
Yeah.
especially like you said, because it hits close to home, because this isn't just a theoretical like Dark Lord casts his spell and it wipes out an army, and it's like, oh, sad flip, it's like,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
like this is something that's happening to people, basically as we speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. I am really glad, like, in spite of how disturbing it was, and how everything, I'm really glad we read this together, because it also got me thinking about crime fiction a little differently. Like,
mm,
up until now, I'd really only read Stephen King's brand of crime fiction,
sure.
like the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. Have you read any of those ones before?
No, not those. Yeah.
Not
I've
those.
read,
Okay.
oh, actually, I read Billy Summers, and I guess that's a crime novel from him.
Billy Summers, right, right. I would say Mr. Mercedes is definitely the far better pick of
Oh,
his
sure.
crime fiction stuff. But it's like crime fiction in the way Stephen King would do it, which is different than than a Don Winslow or anybody who's more deeply steeped in crime fiction. So it was great to kind of read a pillar of that
Yeah.
together. At least with the disturbing stuff, it's like at least we're both in it together for what
Right,
it's worth.
right.
Um,
Well,
so yeah.
and that's somewhat fitting in the book, right? Of like
Yeah.
sometimes the only thing that is keeping these characters sane is their relationships with one another.
Mm, yeah.
Like especially you think of like Nora and her priest friend, who's like
Yeah.
her priest friend is probably my favorite character in the book. He's like one of the only
Yeah.
like good people where it's like, yeah, you go, like,
Yeah.
father.
Totally.
Um,
Totally.
or like you mentioned earlier, like the guys from New York, where they've got like these friendships, and it's kind of in their own screwed up way, but like that's sort of the only thing that's like grounding them or keeping them from going completely off the rails.
Yeah. And it's also the thing that ties the reader to those characters as well. The
Hmm.
idea that, like, these, some of these people are absolute monsters. They go through, still on a human level, go through things that we can relate to, like
Hmm.
you're mentioning the friendships, or with the priest, like doing the right thing in spite of everything going on around
Hmm.
him, stuff like that. So it's like there are these little moments that kind of tie us to those characters.
Yeah.
um so yeah, it's great, man. That's awesome. Are you gonna I know you had a crime fiction month this last month pretty much, right? Reading a lot more crime fiction and stuff. Are you particularly excited about anything this month that you're reading right now?
Like crime or anything at all?
Or just anything at all? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see here. I don't have a set TBR for this next month. Um, I have been, if for folks who have been listening to my channel, they've heard me talk about this. I read
Mhm.
like Ender's Game back when I was 15, and haven't read anything by Orson Scott Card since then. And
Mm.
recently read the Alvin Maker books, and then read a couple other books from him, and I've just been blown away, just blown away by his craft. And so he has a series called the Homecoming series. That's a science fiction series that's completely separate from Ender. And I think I'm going to start reading that this month.
Cool.
I've been excited to get to it. It's like, I know people have their issues with Card, but it's like over the last 3 months, I've read 8 books by him, and they've been 8 of my favorite books that I've read in the last 3 months. So like he's doing
Wow.
something right here. So yeah,
Wow,
so I'm
that's
gonna
great
keep
to hear.
chasing to try to figure out what that thing is.
Dude, even struggle to say this out loud, but I haven't even read Ender's Game yet, so I think
Oh,
that's
okay.
top of the list for this year. Yeah, yeah, that's great. And what is that series about? The one that you'd mentioned that you're looking to start?
The Homecoming series. So
Yeah,
it's
Homecoming.
I don't have like I haven't looked up a ton about it, but
Okay, yeah.
my understanding is that it's about a like humans way off in the future, and
Mhm.
there's a planet that's sort of there's an AI that's ruling over it that's almost like a deity, and that it is in crisis and needs to call upon some of the people of the planet to help save it, and it ends up becoming this big sprawling saga and like pilgrimage for these people. And I'm assuming based on the titles of some of the books that they end up returning to Earth, which they had
Wow.
left. So
Yeah.
um
Well, that sounds phenomenal.
yeah.
You're gonna have to definitely let me know how that is. That sounds great. I love that. I see every time, either now that we're talking or anytime I see your videos, I'm always getting more for my TBR. So thanks for making it a lot longer.
Yeah, well thanks. That's one that I'm excited to get to, because right now I'm reading
Mm.
Paladin of Souls by not Le Guin.
Oh,
What am I saying? Bujold. Los
oh,
McMaster
cool,
Bujold.
cool.
Yeah.
Sure, sure.
And it's really good. But Bujold is an author that I enjoy, but I really like her stories, but I find her writing to be um not dry, but like kind of chewy, meaty. Like
Mm-mm.
it's not necessarily like it takes a little bit of work for me to get through them. They're not very popcorny, which
I
is
see.
great.
Yeah.
Like there's a time and place for that, but it's taking some like brain power. So I'm kind of like thinking on like, okay, do I have something else that I slot in here to help like balance it out? Anyway, we'll see. But
Yeah, yeah.
that's what's on my radar right now.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. Yeah, speaking of trying to balance the palette, I know I'm reading the second book in the Last King of Osten Ard series right now
Mm.
called Empire of Grass. I forget, have you read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn?
I've not
Or
read anything, Tad. Yeah.
oh, you are in for a treat, my friend. Because so I read Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. I loved it. It is slow burn fantasy. It's got a Robin Hobb like quality to it. And I thought, okay, sequel series, maybe it's just a little bit of a callback to the
Sure.
original, and the original is the more popular one. I can unequivocally say, and I've read one novella and one novel, and started the second novel in that new
Mm.
series. This is head and shoulders above the original.
Wow.
I'm flabbergasted. Like, it's opened up the world and the politics in a completely different way, and you're seeing again like the granular stuff we were talking about with Power of the Dog. It's like even on other side, both sides of the conflict, you're seeing things at the granular level in a way that I've not seen much fantasy explore. I mean, I'm
Mm.
blown away. And like I was discussing it with Philip Chase and Books with Genghis Khan and Andy Smith. We had done like a video thing, and like I was talking to Philip Chase as well, and he was also blown away. He's like, if this continues in this way, that it'll be among his favorites of all time. It's like that kind of,
Wow.
yeah, which is you know, I praise. So, and
Yeah.
I feel the same. Like if this continues the way it has been, I mean, I can't stop thinking about it. I'm
Mm.
excited to read it after this tonight. You know, so I was pleasantly blown away by how good it is. But it is also a lot, you know, the languages and all sorts of like cultural elements and historical elements. It's a lot. So I've been balancing it with the first book of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I figured like do a reread because of the adaptation news
Mm.
and stuff.
I was gonna
So
say, I was like, have you not read Final Empire yet?
oh
So
yeah, yeah, I
if it's
have
a
read it.
reread, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. I was like, wow, that's like, I mean, obviously, like, you know, people can read what they want, but like, it's not
Yeah,
often
yeah.
on like fantasy booktube that people are like, nope, haven't read Final Empire.
Right,
So
right, right. Totally, totally. Yeah. Yeah, I read that around similar time, probably 2020 or so.
okay,
Right around the start of the pandemic, I think.
okay,
And yeah, and I just yeah, I blew through those really fast. So I'm actually excited to see what it feels like. Do you ever do this where you reread something you haven't read for a while? And I know you were talking about Ender's Game
Mhm.
previously, but like, you know, we read it with the more seasoned eyes. I was
Yeah.
curious to see like would I still like it because it's very much a gateway to fantasy in a lot of respects.
Mhm.
But you know, I'm a couple chapters deep right now, and I'm like the magic is still there. What I liked about it
Mm.
then, I really feel like it's just really well written. Um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's
That's
great to
cool.
see. You know, yeah,
Yeah, I'm a big like defender of rereading books.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I really think that's something that um, if if I could point to one flaw in BookTube, and it's not really a flaw of BookTube, it's a flaw of human nature. And
Mm,
BookTube just kind of you know, puts a magnifying glass on that, is the always getting to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I feel like people's reading sometimes suffer that because I've
mm,
asked people like, oh, well, like if you could reread something, like what would you do? They're like, well, I'd probably just take that time and read the next thing on my TBR. And it's like, you know,
mm,
that's great, and I understand, and I get it. Some people just aren't interested in rereading things, but like you said, the books don't change, but you change as a person. And there are
yeah.
books that like like. Here's one that's been on my brain. I said when I was young and like a pretentious snot-nosed kid instead of a pretentious snot-nosed adult. I read when I was reading all these big books. One of them was Moby Dick, the
Oh,
Melville
cool.
book. I was like, oh, I want to read this, and I read it, and like right over my head. Did not understand why. And Moby Dick has been biting at my heels like a little dog for the last 3 or 4 months. I've been like, I want to go back to that because I feel like there was
Oh,
something
yeah.
there that I missed, and I've been thinking about. And it's like the book obviously hasn't changed, but I'm, you know, what, like getting close to 10 years older than I was when I read it in
Right.
the first time. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the Gene Wolfe fan in me, or that's talking now. But I guess I look at it as like I read, you know, lots of books last year.
Mm,
I don't think I read a single book that I liked more than The Lord of the Rings. And it's like,
mm,
if I'm trying to read like the best books I can, I'm not saying just read Lord of the Rings. I'm not saying just read your favorites, but especially if you're like, man, everything's kind of stale. I want to switch things up. Like, go back to your favorites. You know that you're like the next book on your TBR, there is a 99% chance will not be as good as your favorite books.
mm,
That doesn't
yeah,
mean don't read it, but that does mean you should make space to go back to your favorites again. So, all
yeah.
right, sermon over.
Hey, I'm in complete agreement, man, and I definitely struggle with that balance myself, because again, like you said, you know, there's so many books on our TBRs, and we always want to check out the next one, and then you hear about more recommendations from other
Yeah.
people, or something suddenly. Does this ever happen to you where you hadn't heard of a book before, you suddenly hear it and you start to see it everywhere? Like
Yeah.
you just hear multiple times, like, oh,
Yep.
great, you know, it's not like I have enough on my list already. So that's the struggle. But I've found every time I've reread, I've always gotten something out of it, even if it's not quite what I remember it to be.
Mm,
You know, I was doing a reread of The Dark Tower last year, I
mm,
think, or the year before. My gosh, it was when I first read it, I was going through like kind of some emotional turmoil at the time of
mm,
my life and like kind of a turning point, and it was just like salvation for me in a lot of ways, you
mm,
know, that series. And then reading it afterwards with more seasoned eyes, I got a different vantage point of it, you know,
mm,
and you see the threads that will lead to the final book, you know. And so knowing what you
Interesting.
know, you're going to see things from a different perspective as well.
Mm.
You know, it's like when you know how something ends, then how it starts is going to affect you differently. So yeah, every time I get to reread, I feel the same. You know, have you read the
That's
Dark Tower
okay.
series? Oh, sorry, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was gonna take it somewhere else. So that's
Well, I guess just a quick aside was like, have you read the Dark Tower series or
not Winded Through the Keyhole, but the main seven
the
I've
main
read.
seven?
Yeah,
Okay, cool, cool.
yeah,
Yeah, that's definitely a great reread one if you ever get a
yeah.
chance.
That'd
Seven
be
books, you know.
interesting. I
What's another seven on the list, right?
right. That's right. And like, and once again, King does that thing where like they start out small and they get a little bigger, a little
Hmm.
bigger, a little bigger.
Right.
Um, that's a series that I don't know. I feel like each book had a lot of stuff that I like. I felt like each book had was like split. There's stuff in
Mm.
it where I'm like, this is some of my favorites. I'm loving this, and then would have stuff where it's like, what is this? Like, what are we doing here? And it would change on a reread. But the easiest one to point to is in book 7. Um, there's this whole sequence with what are they called? Um, it's a sequence everybody talks about not liking in the in that one. We've got like these people in like an institution that are being like psychologically used for
Yeah.
some purpose. I can't
Yeah.
remember what
Yeah. Yeah.
it's called. But it's like
Not.
a major chunk of the
Yeah.
book. What is
Yeah.
this?
The Breakers or no? The
That's it. Yeah,
yeah.
the
Right.
breakers.
Yeah.
Um, but I love that content so much. Like Roland, Eddie,
Hmm.
Jake, and Odetta or
Yeah.
Susanna or
Yeah.
whatever,
Suzanne.
whatever
Yeah.
you want to call her.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just such a fun group to travel with.
Yeah. Definitely. And Oi. Let's not forget Oi.
Yeah, that's right.
Integral. Yeah. No, I agree, and I feel like with a series like that, it's so roots to branches too because it's you have so much interconnectivity between his other books. So then it makes you go, oh, I should read everything else, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
hence why I have
I
that shelf behind me, you know,
Yeah, I read
Stephen King.
that was what got me to read The Stand. And like I
Oh,
feel
cool.
like Randall Flagg basically works in The Dark Tower if you've read The Stand. Maybe
Hmm.
Dark Tower fans would disagree with me, but it's like, man, I uh, most of the menace that I felt from him in Dark Tower is like, oh, but I've seen The Stand. I've seen like what what this sucker is capable of, and just
Yeah.
yeah, I love Flag as a villain, and so seeing like having that crossover is probably my one of my favorite points of doing that
Oh,
in
yeah.
Dark
Oh,
Tower.
it's great. That and the Salem's Lot crossover, I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting, you know?
Yeah.
Especially after reading Salem's Lot, like you get a very different
Hmm.
vantage point on Wolves of the Kala.
Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
to that point, have you heard the news that I guess there's a new Talisman book coming out this year
Yeah.
that is supposed to have Dark Tower connections or something,
That's
which
what
is
they
very
say. Yeah, that like
yeah.
Straub wrote a bunch of notes that King is basing it off of or something like
I
that.
think so. Yeah, yeah. Have you read the Talisman
Mm-mm.
or Black House? Okay, okay.
No.
Yeah, I've read Talisman, and again that one felt very much like how you mentioned with the Dark Tower, where it's like 50% of it's like, oh, brilliant, you know, bravo. This
Hmm.
is some of King's best stuff, and then the other 50% was like, okay, you know, it's like didn't quite resonate there. But I haven't read Black House yet, and it's supposed to actually be very different because Talisman is more like fantasy adjacent, portal fantasy kind of thing going on,
Hmm.
and then Black House takes place when one of the kids is an adult, and it's a crime fiction novel,
Hmm.
apparently. So almost
Okay.
different genre and like, you know, tying the character to something completely different story. So I'll be curious to see what that's like, and then also what this last book in the trilogy, I guess, this new trilogy is going to be.
Yeah. Nikhil, like so like obviously you're a big King fan. Have you read everything he's written at this point?
No, I've read like I think 55 of his novels, so quite a few. But I haven't read all of them yet. It's one of my channel goals to get through
Okay.
everything. So hopefully I'll get to read more. I've been like so in the on the fantasy kick lately, but yeah, I still have a probably a dozen or two more to go. You know.
Yeah.
Which is insane to think about, right? It's like,
Yeah. What do you think of his Holly books?
okay, so I loved Mr. Mercedes, and the second book, I forget what it's called. But anyways, the second one in that trilogy I really liked. Third one was okay, and then everything Holly related for me has gotten less and less interesting as it's gone. And then I think there was the newest one was Never Flinch, I think was the one that came out. And that was easily my least favorite Stephen King book, maybe ever.
Hmm.
Um, so that's kind of where I'm at on Holly. I don't know. Have you read much of the Holly books or
No, none. But I,
none?
I'm
Okay.
I'm fascinated at seeing like lifelong King fans just like reject him. And I'm wondering, do you have a theory as to why like King, like this is like his thing now? Like is like Holly is my character and I'm doubling down on this. When like people would commit like unforgivable crimes to get a Dark Tower spin-off or to get a
Yeah,
Young
yeah,
Roland
yeah.
book or
Right.
something. You know, it's like it's right there. And he's like, nope, Holly, I got another banger here. So like what's your theory as to like why this is the character that's stuck with him?
I was joking with Mike that she's gonna make her way. She's gonna be an integral part of Stephen King's Dark Tower multiverse by the end of it all. But I just don't know. I think he found like maybe it felt like he found a fascination with like Dennis Lehane and Michael Connelly or something, and he just wanted to
Mhm.
make his own crime fiction books over the last 10 years or so. And I don't know what it is about Holly that he likes as much as he does. Like for me, she is abrasive, but she has her charm. She's probably on the spectrum a little bit. She has some interesting quirks about her that are, interesting to read. It's cool. But
Mhm.
there's nothing about her that I feel like goes, oh, this is a character I just want to understand more about her. I felt like she did actually better as a side character or like one of an ensemble cast of characters, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
In the Mr. Mercedes trilogy in particular, she was part of an ensemble cast. So it felt like, oh, this is cool. The quirkiness was nice in relationship to the whole. You had a retired police officer who's a little bit of a grump. You have a kid who's like a college student who's like very excited to be a part of the whole mystery of the week thing going on. Then you have her who's like this quirky person but who has a really keen observational eye for things.
Mhm.
The trio works really well, but when it's like, what did Holly make for lunch today? I just don't care, it's it's like that. I think that's the hardest part for King fans to contend with, and then
Mhm.
it's like what she has the three books. Then she had a book called Holly. She was in another book. I don't want to say what it is because I don't want to spoil it. She was in a novella, Never Flinch, and there was like another one. So it's like 8 books. It's like a
Yeah.
lot. And I think he has one more planned. So it's like,
That's
you
crazy.
know, it's insane. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, hey, I'm just glad he's writing. I'm glad I'll read whatever he writes, but I definitely am not as excited about Holly. I don't know. I'll be
Well,
very curious. Yeah, what you think
and that's just
once.
it, right? Is like so recently, like and I said I read through the Alvin Maker books and just adored them by card.
Yeah.
And then last year, one of the first books that I read was The Stress of Her Regard by Tim Powers. And that
Mhm.
just like I got bit by a bug, and like Tim Powers is now one of my favorite authors, like 12 or
Oh wow.
13 books later, just like flying through
Mhm.
them. I adore the guy's work. And there's a certain I don't know, there's a certain thing that I love about it of like these guys were icons of their genre or were very instrumental in their genre back in like
Yeah.
the 80s, back in the 90s, and they're still putting out books today. Like
Mm.
Tim Powers just had a book come out in December, and then the last Alvin Maker book is coming out next month. It's like
What?
that is so cool that like I get
Yeah.
to be alive and like live at a time when like some of like favorite authors and series of mine are still like being made. And like
Wow.
and I'm not just talking about like guys like Christopher Rocky or guys like Abercrombie where they're still in their prime, they're still writing. And I suppose there's a certain charm to that with Stephen King of like, even if this isn't the best book that he's put out, like it's still cool that this guy who's been an icon is still putting out books.
Oh yeah, and it's like an icon for 50 years, if you
Yeah.
think about it. He already had by this time 50 years ago, Carrie Salem's Lot out already. You know, it's,
It's
I mean,
insane.
that's pretty incredible right there.
Yeah.
And I think Carrie the movie was coming out around this time 50
Hmm.
years ago. So yeah, he was already in the pop culture lexicon by that point, which is, kind of crazy to think. I got to
Yeah.
check out Tim Powers at some point. Is there a good place to start, you would say?
That's a really good question. So this is my project, and I don't know that I've like officially gone over this
Yeah.
all in depth yet, but I'm working on reading through like all of his books so that I can make a video on like what is the best place to start with him.
Oh,
But it kind of
cool.
depends on the person. So I haven't quite hit all of them, but
Fair.
because
Yeah.
you like King, but like so here's the thing though, but like you like the Matthew Corbett books, which are historical like mystery type of books, right?
They are, but it's if like I feel like Robert McCammon and Stephen King have a lot of parallels in the way they approach character.
Mhm.
So I feel like if you like Stephen King type character work, you'll probably like Robert McCammon and Matthew Corbett.
Okay.
So yeah, so I feel like his character work for that, it makes it feel not quite just historical fiction. There's a
Hmm.
little horror element. There's some cool, little genre blend things going on. But yeah.
Yeah. So if you like, because that's the thing is a lot of what Powers is known for is um historical stuff. He
Mm,
writes these they're not alternate histories, they're what he calls secret histories. So without contradicting any of the established historical record of what we know happened, he'll like
mhm.
paint between the lines with like vampires and werewolves and ghosts and witches and all that good stuff. Um
Cool.
so if you since you like the scarier books and some historical books, um, there's a couple of starting places that would be good. If you want one that is like a bizarre, nutso action adventure, like time travel,
Mm.
historical, slightly horror novel, The Anubis Gates is great. It's
Okay.
his most
Cool.
famous book. Um, it's it is nuts. So like most people who get turned off by it, they're like, "What? Like stuff is getting thrown at me like every other chapter," and I like that's why I'm telling you, like it is a nuts book. And
Yeah.
the reason why I recommend it is because I think I really love it, and I do think it is, in my opinion, one of his better books.
Mm.
But it doesn't work for everyone, and it's not indicative of what his normal like most of his stuff is not sci-fi time travel, so the
I
historical side
see.
of it is good, but like um but honestly I would say another good starting place for him would be On Stranger Tides, which is his pirate novel. um
Oh, cool.
yeah, so
Wow.
that's
Awesome.
well, I won't bore you, but there's a long story about how that book inspired Pirates of the Caribbean, and that's why the
No
fourth Pirates of the
way.
Caribbean movie is named On Stranger Tides. um
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. That is
but,
awesome.
but
Yeah.
okay, I
Sorry, go
should
ahead.
ask, like, do you want to hear the story
Yeah,
of
yeah.
it?
Tell me. Yeah.
Okay, so because this is so crazy how this works. So Tim Powers grows up in California. In at that time, Disneyland, and like they still have some of these, but like there a lot of their rides weren't just marketing for the movies. It was like,
Yeah.
what is it? Like Danger Mountain and Jungle Cruise and so Pirates of the Caribbean is not a movie at this time. It's an
Right.
adventure ride. So he goes on
Mhm.
this and he's like, as a kid, he thought like, oh, ghost pirates, that would make a great idea for a book. So he grows up and he writes this book called On Stranger Tides that's about a character named Jack Shandy who is fighting off the evil necromancer sorcerer pirate Blackbeard. And there's
Wow.
zombie pirates and there's voodoo and there's like sorcery battles over the top of pirate ships, and like they're fighting over the Fountain of Youth, and it's a nuts book. It's great. And so he writes this book, and then when they go to make the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie, Curse of the Black Pearl, um,
Mm.
there's a number of elements from that first movie that are weirdly similar to Tim Powers' book, where it's like, huh,
Mhm.
okay. And so the word on the street is that to ensure that everybody's happy and that there's no suits, lawsuits, or anything like that, Disney buys the rights to Tim Powers' book. And they say, after the first trilogy, if we make a fourth movie, it'll be based on your book. And so the fourth movie is Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, based on his book. Now, by this time, most of the material from his book has already been used in some way or is similar enough
Sure.
to things in other movies that what is left is Blackbeard, Fountain of Youth, zombie pirates, a little bit of voodoo, and have one of the main character be a necromancer pirate's daughter. And
Wow.
so like it's basically like trappings from the book that are then put into a Pirates of the Caribbean plot line. But that's how
Huh.
the ride that inspired the movie inspired the book that inspired the movie that the book is based on,
That is
or that
so
the movie is based
interesting.
on. Yeah.
Oh, that is
So
so cool. See, I remember growing up I was a child of the 90s, and I remember
mhm,
going on that Pirates of the Caribbean ride
yeah,
before it became a film franchise. So when the film was coming out, I just thought, oh, it's based on the ride. They're trying to make a movie that is like, oh, take one of their rides and turn it
right.
into a movie kind of thing. I had no idea about all this other backstory. This is fascinating.
So that's
I'll definitely have to
that's the
read this.
long version, but yeah.
Cool. My wife also loves anything related to pirate stories, so I'll definitely have to let
Mhm.
her know as well. So good looking out. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a if you want to read Tim Powers, like On Stranger Tides is a good one to go with because it's got some of his like wild out there ideas and it's a lot of fun and it's swashbuckling. But
Yeah.
it's also short. It's not terribly long. It's like 300 pages, something like that. But there's a lot packed into those 300 pages. So
Cool. All right. You sold me, man. I'm excited to check it out. I do want to be mindful of your time, Sam, but I did want to ask you one last question, if
yeah,
it's okay with you.
no, we're good.
You have a kid, you have work, you have all these other obligations. How do you read so much, man? Because you're mentioning, oh yeah, I discovered Tim Powers, read like reading all his books, and oh, I read 8 of these other ones, and yeah, I would
Yeah.
love to know, how do you kind of have a specific time of day you read? Do you try to get a certain page count in? Is it yeah, like I would love to know kind of what your process is.
Yeah. So I'm privileged in that I have a lot of good luck with audiobooks. So that's one way. Um,
Cool.
I know audiobooks doesn't work for everyone, or not everybody has that privilege, but yeah. So there's a lot of books that I go through on audio. So like Power of the Dog, I listen to, um, and I will say like um, I'm not somebody who says that audiobooks is not the same as reading. These are two
Right.
distinctly different things. Okay. Now, whether or not it counts, like on Goodreads, like yes, obviously, but it's not the same thing. It
Right.
is it is different. So I do try to say things like I went through a book rather than like I
Oh,
read it, but
sure.
I slip up in my vocabulary there. So like audiobooks are easily over half of the books that I go through nowadays
Mhm.
are on audio. Um,
Yeah.
but then, like, the other part of it is, like, I don't know, man, like, I got a boring personal life, like, I don't watch a whole lot of movies, I suck at getting through TV shows, um, I don't have a group of friends that I go out and like, my friends are all pretty chill people, so it's like morning coffee is about as wild as we get, so I'm not doing other stuff in the evening,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
so, yeah, like, most of my reading is, like this is, like, the hobby that I go to
Yeah.
after kiddos down, and if it sometimes Anna and I will like watch a movie at night or we'll work on a project or something, but if
Mhm.
she's got something else that she's doing, it's often it's a book. um
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we
It's
talk about
same.
not taking the easy path and like with like algorithms and things like that, and guess what, that also applies to you being what the parasites latch onto and just endlessly scrolling your life away, and like as
Yep.
much as I love reading, like I gotta watch out for that stuff because it'll
Yeah.
actually damage your soul, and that's I don't want that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's a
so
very
reading, yeah.
valid point, man. We could all use a little less doom scrolling in our lives, I think.
Yeah,
Oh man. Well, dude, this has been a wonderful chat. I'm so glad we got a chance to do this finally. I know it was long
yeah, thanks for
overdue,
having
and
me on.
yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time. I feel like I learned so much more about you, and I also got some more great books for the TBR. So it's always fun when that happens. And dude, I gotta say, I really enjoyed reading this Power of the Dog with you,
Mhm.
as disturbing as it was. So hopefully we'll find a lighter read for our next one or something. But
Yeah, no, that sounds
yeah,
good.
that's great. Well, thanks again for being here. Thank you everyone for watching. I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. Be good to yourselves, be good to each other always, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye.